your confidence and own your power. I love that.
Look around the room. You'll see that you're not so alone after all, and that unconfidence could look like any of us. Maybe your whole life you have been told that the best wins, but I'm telling you right now that the best known will win.
Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Grasp Confidence Podcast. I'm your host, Tara LaFon Gooch, and this is going to be a really interesting conversation today because we're talking about the power of releasing our past. You know, the past, the chains that sometimes can bind us, or at least that's how it feels, right? Maybe we've been through a trauma. Maybe we've been through adversity. Who hasn't? And sometimes those past, even though it happened back then, can still feel like it's with us. So I'm here talking to my friend Deborah Craig, who is calling in from Scotland to help us all release the chains that bind us. Deborah, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Tara. It's so lovely to be here. So for everyone that doesn't know me already on LinkedIn, my name is Deborah Craig. I'm a hypnotherapist and a mindset coach, and I really help people set themselves free from that mental prison, free themselves from their anxious, overthinking mind, any trauma from the past, help them release that so that they can go on and create the careers, the relationships, the life that they actually want, which I've done for myself now, and I help other people do that now too.
You've done it for yourself. See, that's what I like to hear, because we don't work with coaches or therapists who have always had it together. I like to work with people who have kind of been through life's fire, because the best people to learn from are those with lived experience. Right? Isn't that right?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I actually agree with that, Tara, because a lot of my clients actually say to me that one of their most favourite things, separate from all my academia, qualifications, all the things that I go through, that's, all the official stuff, the things that they love the most is the stories. And while I'm not an oversharer, I do think that it gives a lot of assistance to my clients when I can say, you know what, this was a bit like what my life was like before. And when they realise, so wait a minute, so you're on the other side of this computer now, and you had all of that going on in your life. So that means anything's possible then, because if you could do that to where you are now, that makes me feel human and that I can get through whatever's going on. And it really does lift people up. So I'm a definite advocate for lived experience being a real foundation to understanding what people can really be going through and how to help them navigate it out the other side.
I love that so much. So you mentioned, you've got all these professional accolades, all these credentials, right? And of course they've helped shape your career. But tell us a little bit about this career. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now, because I know it involves a really, really interesting subject, which is hypnotherapy. Because a lot of people are really interested in that right now, Deborah. They're interested in kind of peeling back the layers and figuring out what's really the root cause of things and why people have certain behaviors or tendencies, and they want to understand themselves a little bit better. But tell us a little bit about this hypnotherapy work that you do, and how you help clients overcome their past struggles.
Sure. So the way that I work is I combine hypnotherapy with mindset coaching as well, so that you not only can sort of look at the past safely with hypnosis, you can do that in a safe way without being re-triggered. You can identify and heal those traumas, anything that has gone on in the past that's still lurking there, old belief systems, old narratives, old stories, that you're still keeping yourself stuck with, because we know that the subconscious is where all the blueprint is. That's everything that's happened in our lives. It's where the stories are created. And if we have not addressed that, then quite often what will happen is the life that we have right now is based on then everything that's been before, rather than what's potential for us. Because if we can't actually see what's possible based on only looking at the past, then we'll never know what we're capable of. And that actually is the thing that happened to me. That's why I shared that there. So with my clients, being able to join the dots together for them from their past to their present, to help them confidently step into their present self now, and then be able to navigate them forward on their journey by pointing out or helping them sort of get those milestones in place. Well, where is it they're trying to get to? So that sort of journey from the past to the present to the future is how I try and help clients. And the key area that I really work on, Tara, is understanding our nervous system and really knowing that, you know, if we are dysregulated because of the past, which we'll probably touch on quite a bit today in our conversation, then what it can leave us is in a place where throughout the rest of our lives, we could experience things that re-trigger us. And what happens is we think we're experiencing that same thing that we did all those years ago. It's not the same thing. It just feels the same way because we're holding on to a lot of that from the past. And when we get re-triggered over and over, it eventually stops us doing the things that we want to do, because we'll steer away from that. We'll move ourselves away from things and stop taking risks. So that's the work that I do. The reason I use hypnotherapy is because it gets to the root of the issue. It helps us rewire the subconscious. It allows us to explore possibilities of what could be that people who feel stuck probably can't even imagine that their life could be. But if if you've read anything in the sort of visualization world, or Joe Dispenza's, anybody in that space, they all talk about the power of being able to create in your own mind where you want to go. And if you can do that deeply under hypnosis, then you're freeing yourself from that, that little monkey mind that will jump in and say, no, you can't do that. No, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. And all these things. That little part of your mind gets quieter, and you can actually then explore more of what you're trying to achieve. And when we've seen it, we've felt it, we've heard what's going on around about us in that future experience, it's so much easier to create it in real life, because now we can see that it actually could exist for us. What I find with a lot of people is they're so limited because they can't even begin to imagine that something else is possible for them.
Lots to unpack right there. So, number one, I want to emphasize the word monkey mind and it preventing us from going after risky things, right? Because our amygdalas kicks in, and that, fear kicks in and says, you know what? You're going to fail. You know what? People are going to laugh at you, right? You're going to lose money. All of these like limiting beliefs start kicking in and start telling us things. And those are actually low level. That's a low level thought process. It's an old way of thinking, but it can keep us right where we are, Deborah. Wow.
100%.
That's a lot for people.
So our brain,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, our brain has a purpose, and it's to keep us safe. So, when we have our little monkey mind jumping up and down, unless we know how to navigate that and regulate that little monkey, which is, our anxious mind, if we are not able to do that, then it will continue to keep us stuck in our old existing beliefs. But if we're able to regulate our nervous system, if we're able to free ourselves from that anxious overthinking, then the possibilities just start to open up. And I think it's important to know it's not about never having anxious feelings or, feeling nervous or scared. We need to still have those parts in us to also keep us safe. But it's when we have this imagination that we are expecting the worst, we are creating the worst ideas in our head. So, our imagination's running wild, but in a negative way, not in a helpful way. And it's that we want to try and work with to help us create more of what we want and move away from what doesn't serve us.
I think anybody can benefit from this, and I'm really interested. So I've actually had hypnotherapy. I've had NLP and all that good stuff. And you know what? To anybody who isn't sure about it, right? Because maybe they've heard about it, but they think it may not be for them. It's a positive experience, and from my perspective, it actually helped me release my past because I was finally able to forgive.
Yeah.
And when you can
And
forgive,
that's another huge.
it's huge. And you release the past, those chains that once bound you.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that you're saying that maybe it's a person that hurt you or something like that. It's not to say that, you're expunging them from, their bad deeds or something, but
No.
it's to say that you are no longer a victim of their behavior,
Yes.
of their bad deeds or whatever it was, regardless of what it was. I think the more we can free ourselves from these chains, I could see that how it could only progress you for the future, because now those things don't bind you to the past. It's so
No.
empowering, Deborah.
And it really is. And that, to be honest, is exactly what happened for me, because when I was, in my childhood home, it was unstable. I didn't feel safe. My nervous system was shot to bits because I was living in a chaotic household, arguing parents, fear of violence, a lot of alcohol,
Yep.
and just quite a lot of instability. And that was up until I was 17. And I don't know if you know much about how I don't know if they have a similar thing. I think it's the same in America, actually. If there was a report done talking about ACEs, your childhood adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
And if you scaled in a certain number of adverse childhood experiences, you were significantly more predisposed to, I call it, going off the rails. So substance abuse, basically not making much of yourself. And I had several of these, I think 4 or 5 adverse childhood experiences on the list out of 8. And I did fall foul to, I had no direction. I had no one giving me any guidance. My parents separated, and I never saw my dad since then, actually, which is a lot of the work that I did on myself. And
How old were you? How old were you, if you don't mind me asking, when your parents separated in the last
17.
17? Okay.
17, yeah. And at that time, it wasn't available for me to think about university or anything like that. I had to get a job, and my life just took a different trajectory to what I would imagine it might look now if things were in that situation. So for me, getting a job, that's how it started. I went into like admin, but when I left school, I can remember it so clearly. I mean, I was 17, so 31 years ago. I can remember it as clear as day, saying I would love to be a counsellor or a social worker. So even in my soul, all those years ago, I knew who I was, but my life, I wasn't in control of that. Things were just going in a different direction. And I ended up doing some admin work for quite a few years. And then I ended up going into financial services, which is what I did for the longest part of my career, up till about 6 years ago. But during that time, there was a point, I think I was about 28. I could only explain it now on reflection that it felt like a bit of a breakdown that I had, but I didn't know about that then. I didn't even know that was a thing. And it was probably the 28 years of suppressed emotions all coming to a head through alcohol and substances and a partying kind of lifestyle, and thinking that I was going to find the answers externally to all my problems, and everything just came crashing down. And I would say for quite a number of years, I felt, I mean, you would never have known, Tara. I always had good jobs. I always had good pay. I was always climbing the ladder, you know, in my corporate career. I was always away fancy holidays, the fancy cars. So I was trying to find the answer out there. But deep inside, I knew I was so sad on the inside, but I couldn't figure out why. I thought it was all these different things were going to solve it. And through time, I started to do that inner work and started to piece it together. And what you were talking about, that's why it triggered me to think about this. When you said about forgiveness, I always remember the day as clear as anything. It's as clear as a day that I remember saying I wanted to be a social worker and a counsellor. I remember the day I said out loud to a couple of my friends, I feel free.
Oh,
I
wow.
finally forgave my dad. I went, and I didn't forgive. I don't hate him. I still love him. I was like, but I've forgiven him for me. And I'll never forget the feeling that I'd actually set myself free. Now, I didn't wake up the next day and clean my act up straight away. It was a work in progress. But what I know is that was probably the start of me being able to start that proper healing process. And then over the years, started to change my friend groups, cleaned up my act. I decided to get a degree. When I was 39, I started a degree in psychology and counselling, funnily enough, and left corporate and started a brand new life with brand new people in a brand new industry, but where I always belonged. That bit in the middle, that first part, that was, I feel, a bit of a sacrifice to my family, being there for everybody. That part of my life was for them. This part of my life now is for me. That's how I see it.
So many synergies. And for everybody's reference, this is the first conversation Deborah and I have ever had. A lot of people don't believe me when I say that, I think, because we connect so deeply on this show that our listeners sometimes think that I've known my guests for years, right? But this is actually the first time we've talked. So catch these synergies, yeah. Deborah. I haven't seen my father since I was 14 years old. Grew up in an unstable house, lots of alcohol addiction, some mental problems with him as well. I'm not going to go into it on the show, but some family history of some, mostly addiction, violent behavior. So talking about, adverse childhood experiences, very similar. And then one day you decided to transform your life. And this is
I struggled a wee bit there, Tara. There was quite a lot of that I'm not getting with the signal, but hopefully it's still working okay for the recording.
Yeah, absolutely. I can hear you just fine. It's okay, but yeah, lots of synergies there as well. And the important thing is to know for everybody is that life does go on and your past doesn't have to define you unless you give it that power, right? Talk about
and
it.
I think that's the key. That's actually the key statement, isn't it? Like I was on another podcast actually just last week, I think it was, and that's exactly what we were talking about. Like, your past doesn't need to define your future. You get to decide at any point. Now, I never ever blamed. There's no blame for me on other people. We have to take radical responsibility for ourselves. But I do look in sometimes, and I'll be honest and think, it was a bit of a rough ride at the start, and I was very lost and without direction. So yeah, sometimes I feel probably a wee bit hard done by about the starting point. But then I had to wake up to say, hold on a minute, I don't want that to then define the rest of my life. I want to do meaningful work. I want to do work that makes a difference in the world, and I want to stand by my own values. And to do that, I had to take completely responsibility for my own behaviour, my actions, the lifestyle I was living, and completely change absolutely everything. So you can be, part of your story and still maintain that, fine. Or your story can be part of your journey that then leads you to be the version of yourself that you are in the present and for the future. And I think that's the thing that I've managed to do over the last 10 years or so. But it did take a long time to get me where I was trying to go. It wasn't an easy journey.
Well, nobody said it ever was, right? And it's not supposed to be
No.
easy. It's not. And, the more wonderful something is, sometimes the harder it is to achieve, and that's okay. It's all about the journey. And there actually is no destination. You just keep learning and growing, or at least you should, right? And this,
Yeah.
this journey of empowerment that we're talking about, I want to hit on a particular word that you just used, which was radical responsibility. So that is the second tenet right there in my grasp method, responsibility. And actually,
Oh,
a lot of people have questions about this. Why responsibility? Why is that so important in gaining
yeah.
and personal development? But if we're not taking radical responsibility for our lives, for our choices, for the way we're letting our past define us or not define us, for the relationships we're in, for the friendships we have, for the choices we make every day, ultimately we're not going to develop into that person that we're meant to be. You have to take responsibility, Deborah.
So I missed that. Yeah, I think you've only got one shot at this, realistically. So, taking that responsibility, it's not easy because there's a comfort in staying in victimhood mentality, because you'll always find people that are happy to stay in there with you. It's a safe zone in some ways, even though it might not be pleasant. But when you take that responsibility, it takes so much courage. And that's why I actually love your podcast all about confidence. It does take a lot of courage, a lot of confidence to be able to decide. This is what I notice actually with clients. They come to me at a point where they know that they're now ready. So I suppose they've reached the radical responsibility part of their own life, where they know, if I don't take action, if I don't take radical responsibility right now by engaging with someone that can help me navigate my problems, I'm just going to perpetuate things for another 6 months, year. And then we all know a year goes into 2 years, and it's 5 years, and you think, I'm still in the same place.
Yep.
Or not, if you take that radical responsibility to take action.
It is so important, my friends. The good news is that it's possible for anybody to do this, right? It depends on the mindset that you have and the amount that you really want to change. Anybody
Yes.
has the capability of doing this, though. We have the capability of completely transforming our lives. And, humans tend to think, and let me know what your thoughts on this, but sometimes we think that it's not possible to completely change, but we actually see it in nature all the time. A caterpillar turns into a butterfly. It actually turns into something completely different than it was. But the thing about the cocoon that the caterpillar's in, it actually has to have some adversity to get out of that cocoon. Its wings have to have some resistance to get out of that cocoon. If it doesn't go under that adversity and that metamorphosis, it can't develop into that beautiful butterfly that we see, know, and love, right? So
Yep.
transformation is possible. It happens in nature all the time. And why can't it happen to us? The only thing really stopping us is our
It's
mindset.
us, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's our
It's
mindset.
what's going on in there, yeah. If we decide, I think as well, it's just getting to that decision stage.
Yeah.
It's looking at it and thinking, do I want more of the same?
Yeah.
And if I don't, then how am I going to move it forward? And sometimes that's picking up a book, doing
Yep.
some courses, engaging with the right person, whatever it takes to move you forward.
So true. It is really just, we don't have to know all the steps. And people ask me all the time, what steps, what steps, what steps? The step is positive and making small changes, Again, stop overthinking everything, please, everybody. Make small changes in a positive direction, and more small positive changes happen in your life congruently, right? So if you want to completely
100%.
transform,
It's the
yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's the compound effect, isn't it? The more that we keep doing the small things, as long as we're moving forward, it's not going to be linear, the journey, the success, but it will compound over time and we will get results in whatever that looks like for you.
It's 1%. It's one foot in front of the other. I said this in a podcast recording a week or two ago. I was coaching my friend, and she was saying that she wasn't good at marketing or something like that, copywriting, something like that. And but she also hasn't put in the action to be better at copywriting. So she's having an adverse reaction to it and has decided, no, I'm just not going to learn it. So my answer to her was, do you know anybody who's a really good runner? And she said, yeah, I know somebody who just did a marathon or something. I said, do you think that person got better at running by watching other people run or by thinking about running? She said, well, no. And I said, it's kind of the same with everything in life. You might not be great at it at first. It's okay. Nobody expects you to. You just put one foot in front of the other and you keep going in that positive direction toward growth. And eventually, with enough time, effort, and consistency, you can develop into that person you want to become, right? So it doesn't have to, we don't have to know every single step. We just need to take small pieces of action that compound over time to give us that, investment in the end. But the thing about it is, folks, you never stop learning. You never stop growing. I spend plenty of money on coaching all the time, right? I don't want to be stagnant because for me, my biggest fear is not failure. It's not ridicule. It's staying the same. That's my biggest
Oh,
fear.
100%.
And it's like until your fear,
100%.
until that's your biggest fear, we may not reach those goals. So for me, that's my fear. I don't want to be the same a week from now, let alone a year from now, right?
Nope. 100%. I actually was taking some notes before coming on, and so I was just thinking about some of the things I might want to talk about, and exactly that. I try and see life more like an experiment. So each thing that I try is more like, oh, I'm just experimenting with that. I'll try all these different things rather than, will this succeed or fail? Because I think when we have that in our head, it sometimes puts us off. We think, oh gosh, I don't want this not to work. Whereas with a mindset of, I'm just experimenting with lots of little things and then I'll figure out what clicks and the rest will just fall away. Because, in a laboratory, if they're doing an experiment, is that not what we're doing? We're testing it on lots of things, just to find out which one out of maybe hundreds of thousands of tests actually work. So it's just a wee mindset thing for me. Otherwise, I could see myself, it's easy to feel trapped or stuck. I think as long as you just keep reminding yourself that, wait a minute, this is an experiment, not a life or death situation here. Yeah.
Exactly. Marketing, ironically, going back to marketing, there is no failure in marketing. It's called testing, which is an experiment, right? And I think about it that way in business. I think about that way in personal development. We're never going to bat 1,000, but the good thing is nobody's ever asked you to. The only person that expects you to is
Nope.
yourself, right?
Oh, listen, I'll always say this to anyone I'm speaking to, especially my sisters, actually. I'm like, who put that expectation there? Like,
Yeah,
what is it doing away up here? It's good to have high standards. We need to have high standards to work to, but high expectations, that's a whole other thing. Yeah. Sometimes it's more restricting than it is positive.
exactly. Don't limit yourself and your own. I think we limit ourselves when we do that, right? Because we fail to see the growth potential in things. So it's interesting, but I think a lot of really good takeaways here today. We learned a lot. We learned that we can release the chains that once bound us. We learned that, some of the thinking we're doing is on repeat. It's like a record player, and it's a low level thinking that's not allowing us to have that higher level thinking, which is creativity. And failure is inevitable, growth is optional, right? So it's okay to fail. There really is no such thing as failure. It's, did I learn something? And how can I grow from it? So reframing it from a negative and a lack to something that's actually growth oriented and positive. And we can do this in anything.
100%.
We can do this with our mindsets. We can do this in business. We can do this with literally anything in life. And we should look at everything as a growth opportunity, and how can we learn from something? Deborah,
100%.
any last words, any last pieces of wisdom that you could share with us today?
I would say, let's think, what would be the most. I think the key thing for me is don't let the past define who you are. That's my main thing.
Yeah.
And, don't stay stuck. Be that change. If you want your life to be different, if you're looking at yourself like I did at one point and think, I don't think I'm supposed to be in this life. Something doesn't feel right. I don't feel aligned, or I feel I'm just anxious all the time or worried, and I'm not even enjoying life. Then I would say, like I say to all my clients, it doesn't have to be that way. If it's like that and you're choosing to stay in that, I understand, because we're comfortable with the familiar, even if the familiar is not pleasant. But I can say that if you want a change, you have to take a step forward and get the help to get that change. And then you've got no idea what's out there waiting for you. Trust me. If you take that step, get the help that you need, whether it's coaching or therapy or who knows, whatever it is. But take the step, because your potential you think is there. But I can guarantee you with 100% that the minute you engage with support, the goal you had here is up here, right off this camera, because you don't know what you're capable of, because you are down here with your own limitations and beliefs and all your old stories and narrative. Soon as you move that away, sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit. I feel like I'm proof of that, everybody. Hey, maybe, Deborah, we should do another follow-up podcast. Have you ever done a hypnotherapy, a recorded hypnotherapy session? That'd be interesting.
Oh, now this sounds good. I've done lots of group work. Obviously, I do a lot with clients. And I've done some lives before, believe it or not, way back actually at COVID time. I would love to do that. So you and I offline can have a good chat about that for sure.
Yeah, we should record it, and I think I might air it. We'll see. We'll see what happens when we record it. But we could always make it into shorts and make it really interesting. And I think people would be very interested in that. And you know what? I would do it.
I can't believe I found a first guinea pig that would be open to doing that. So thank you so much. That is amazing. So happy.
You're welcome. I think that would just be cool. Hey, guys, let us know. Send me some messages when you're listening to this. Let us know. Is that a good idea? Is that cool? Would you be interested in watching a hypnotherapy session with me being under
The last bit
Deborah's?
is breaking up
Yes.
now. I'm really struggling to hear you now.
It's okay. It's okay. No worries. Well, thank you so much, everybody who tuned in today for the show. And we will catch you guys on the next episode of Grasp Confidence. Take care.